I posted a dating ad as a joke and accidentally summoned a Galactic War Goddess. It was late at night when he sat alone in his small apartment, the glow of the computer screen shining against his tired face. The city outside was quiet, with only the sound of cars passing now and then. He was a simple man, a mechanic who fixed broken machines during the day and scrolled the internet during the night. He had no big dreams of power, no hidden secrets about the universe. He only wanted a distraction, something to make him laugh before falling asleep. That was when he found himself staring at the dating site. It was an old site, nothing serious, filled with strangers searching for love, jokes, or something in between. He never believed in it, but on that night his boredom turned into a strange kind of creativity. He thought to himself that maybe he could write something funny, something so ridiculous that no one could take it seriously. A joke ad, a little prank against the empty night. His fingers began to type. The words were not planned. They came from the mixture of boredom and imagination. Looking for someone powerful enough to conquer my heart and maybe the universe. Must be tall, must be fearless, must be willing to fight for me. He laughed while writing it. To him it was nothing more than nonsense. He read it again and shook his head, amused by the thought that anyone would even look at such a strange post. But there was a strange feeling in the air, something he could not see or explain. The room felt heavier, as if the air itself grew thick. For a moment the screen flickered. He thought it was the old computer acting up again. The cursor blinked on the empty page, and then the post was sent into the unknown space of the internet. He leaned back in his chair, smiling at his own foolishness. It was only a joke, nothing more. No one would even read it, but then the screen changed. At first it was just a small glitch, like a line of static breaking the light. Then the symbols began to appear. They were not letters he understood. They moved like liquid, glowing in sharp patterns, twisting and rearranging. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and leaned forward. It was not a normal error. It looked alive. The symbols spread across the entire screen, glowing brighter with each passing second. His heart began to beat faster. He pressed keys to stop it, to shut down the computer, but nothing worked. The symbols grew hotter in color until the whole room was bathed in strange light. His chest felt tight, and for a moment he thought maybe he was dreaming. Then the sound came. It was deep, low, and endless, like the growl of the earth itself. The sound shook his desk and made his walls tremble. He jumped up, stumbling back from the computer. The sound grew into a pulse, beating in time with his own heart. Then just as suddenly the computer screen went black. Silence filled the room. He stood frozen, staring at the dead screen. His apartment felt too quiet now, as if the world had taken a breath and refused to release it. He laughed nervously, telling himself it was only a glitch, nothing more than a broken machine. He was ready to sit back down when the window shook violently. He turned toward it, his body stiff. Outside, the night sky had changed. A crack of light was splitting the darkness above the city. It stretched wider and wider, glowing white and gold like the sky itself had been torn apart. He pressed his hands against the glass, his breath fogging the window as he watched in disbelief. The light grew into a circle, burning brighter until it drowned the stars. The crack had become a doorway. A massive shadow moved within it, bigger than anything he had ever seen. Slowly, the shadow took form. It was not a plane. It was not anything made by humans. It was a ship, colossal in size, covered in glowing marks that matched the symbols on his computer screen. His knees grew weak as the ship descended lower, its shape cutting across the clouds. He could feel the weight of it pressing down on the earth, an invisible force that made his bones shake. The air outside roared like a storm, though no wind touched the ground. Lights flickered across the hull of the ship, forming strange patterns that seemed to watch him. The ship stopped just above the city, silent and terrifying. A beam of white light shot down from its center, striking the street outside his building. He stumbled back, his heart hammering against his ribs. From the light, a figure appeared. She was tall, towering above any human, her body wrapped in silver armor that shone like fire. Her hair, black as the void of space, flowed around her shoulders, and her eyes glowed with a sharp golden light. The ground itself seemed to bow beneath her as she stepped forward. She carried no weapon, but she did not need one. Her presence alone was power. He could not move. He could not breathe. She raised her head slowly, her gaze falling upon him as if she had known exactly where to look. Her voice cut through the night, cold and commanding, and it carried the weight of entire galaxies. Who dares summon me? The words froze him where he stood. His joke, his small prank, had turned into something he could not escape. The woman standing in the light was no stranger, no dream, no fantasy. She was real. She was here, and she had come because of him. He stood at the window, trembling, his lips dry, his mind trying to find any reason, any escape. But deep inside, he already knew. The joke had become a chain, and he was bound to whatever she was. The night was no longer his. The city was no longer safe. The universe itself had answered his call, and now it wanted him. The light still poured from the street outside, burning so bright that the shadows inside his room melted into nothing. The woman in silver armor stepped forward, and the ground cracked beneath her boots. Each movement she made was slow and deliberate, like she had crossed countless worlds and carried their weight upon her shoulders. Her gaze locked on him, and it was clear she was not asking but commanding an answer. He could not speak. His throat closed with fear. The words she had shouted, "Who dares summon me?" still echoed inside his skull. He wanted to tell her it was all a mistake, that he had only typed a joke, but his voice refused to leave him. Instead, he only pressed back against the wall, trembling like a man cornered by a storm. The light dimmed enough for him to see more. Behind her, shapes appeared in the air, half made of metal, half made of light. Soldiers, hundreds of them, stepped out of thin air as if the beam was a bridge from another world. Their armor was black and red, sharp like blades, their weapons alive with energy that buzzed in the night. They moved with the same perfect discipline, every step in rhythm, every movement silent. They knelt the moment the woman raised her hand. A ripple of fear swept through him. Whoever she was no ordinary warrior. She was their leader, their goddess, their queen. The soldiers' armor gleamed as they pressed one fist against their chest and bowed their heads to her. She stood tall, staring at him through the window, and for the first time she spoke softer, though her voice was no less dangerous. "You are the one," she said. The words were written. "The bond is sealed." He shook his head violently, fear choking him. "No," he whispered, his voice barely alive. "It was a joke. I did not mean anything." But she tilted her head, her golden eyes burning through him. "There are no jokes in the language of summoning. Only truth. Only destiny." He backed away from the glass, but her hand rose and the window shattered into dust. The shards did not fall. They dissolved into glowing fragments that drifted upward, as if even glass obeyed her will. She stepped into his room, her presence so heavy it made the air vibrate. He stumbled back into his chair, his legs too weak to hold him. She looked at him as if he was a puzzle, something fragile yet important. The soldiers outside remained silent, waiting for her word. The entire city seemed frozen, unaware of the impossible scene unfolding in his small apartment. Finally, he found his voice. "Who are you?" The woman's expression shifted, a faint curve of pride touching her lips. "I am Seraphina of the Eternal War, slayer of the 9 moons, keeper of the blade that split suns, the last daughter of the Crimson Pantheon." She leaned closer, her shadow swallowing him. "And now by your call I am bound to you." The words hit him like thunder. Bound to him? How could someone like her, someone who spoke of stars and wars he had never imagined, be tied to a man who had spent his life fixing broken machines in a small workshop? He tried to explain again, desperate to undo what he had started. "It was not real. I only wrote an ad. Just words. You must be looking for someone else." But Seraphina's gaze hardened. "Do you think the universe makes mistakes?" The signal was pure. The ritual answered. You spoke the words of conquest and the stars obeyed. "By law older than empires, you are my chosen consort." The word consort struck him like a knife. He could not imagine it, him standing beside this woman who looked more like a god than flesh and blood. He opened his mouth to protest, but then the air trembled again. A second light appeared in the sky. Not golden this time, but blue, sharp and violent. Another ship pushed through the crack in the heavens, smaller but bristling with weapons. Its hull gleamed with jagged lines, and the symbols that covered it were darker, hungrier. The soldiers outside stirred, their heads lifting as if sensing a rival's presence. Seraphina's expression sharpened, her hand moving to the side of her armor where no weapon rested, and yet energy began to hum around her fingers. "They dare," she whispered. From the second ship, a voice thundered across the sky, carried not by air but by force itself. "The war goddess bows to a mortal? Then the throne is empty. She is unworthy. The soldiers growled in unison, their discipline breaking for the first time. Serafina's eyes burned hotter as she looked back at him. For the first time, he saw something beyond pride in her face. He saw danger, not only for her but for him. You do not yet understand, she said. But because you have summoned me, the galaxy will test you. Already my enemies gather. They will come for me, and they will come for you. His heart sank, the weight of her words pulling him deeper into fear. He had wanted a laugh, a distraction from the dull night. Instead, he had become the center of something vast and deadly. The rival ship descended lower, its weapons glowing brighter, pointed at the city itself. Panic screamed inside his mind. If they fired, everything would end. But Serafina raised her hand and the air around her pulsed with energy. You will see, she said to him. This is no joke. This is the first trial. If you survive this night, you may yet survive me. The rival ship released a surge of blue fire streaking down toward the streets. In that instant, Serafina stepped into the beam of white light that had brought her. Her armor blazed, her form stretching into something larger, something that filled the room and the sky at once. She lifted her hand, and the fire stopped midair, frozen like glass, then shattered into harmless sparks. The ground shook as she leapt upward, her body carried by a force that defied all laws of gravity. The soldiers followed, forming black wings in the sky. The battle was about to begin, and he was trapped at the center of it. He pressed his hands against the broken wall, staring at the goddess rising into the night. Fear gripped him, but so did something else, a realization that this was no dream and no accident. The war of gods had come to Earth, and it had started with him, and now every star above seemed to be watching. The night sky burned with fire and shadows. 2 alien fleets clashed above the city, their weapons tearing the clouds apart. To anyone else on Earth, it would look like the end of the world. To him, it felt worse than that, because he knew all of it was connected to him. The joke ad, the strange signal, the goddess in silver armor, everything had led to this. And now his life and his planet were tied to a war he could not even understand. Serafina moved like lightning, her body glowing as if the stars themselves flowed through her veins. Every strike of her hand split the sky. Every command from her lips turned her soldiers into shadows of death. The rival fleet fired again and again, but she met their attack without fear. Still, she was not fighting for the city. She was fighting for her pride, for the throne, and for the mortal she now called her chosen. Inside his broken apartment, he crouched near the wall, his eyes wide as he watched the impossible unfold. Explosions lit up the heavens, and his heart raced so hard that he thought it would tear itself apart. He wanted to run, to hide, to wake up and discover it was all only a dream. But the truth pressed heavier than the air around him. He could not escape. Then, in the middle of that chaos, the world shifted again. Serafina descended back to him, landing with the grace of a god, her armor shining, her enemies still roaring above. She looked at him, her expression unreadable, and said, "The trial begins now. You will walk with me." He shook his head, stammering. "Walk with you? Out there? I will die." Her lips curved into something like a smile, though it held no warmth. "It is not a battlefield you will face. Not tonight. It is something older, something sacred to my people. You called me with the words of conquest and desire, and so I must test your worth. We will share a rite. In your tongue, you would call it. A date," his breath caught. A date? At this moment, with fire raining from the sky. He thought she was mocking him, but her golden eyes told him otherwise. She was deadly serious. "I do not understand," he said. "You do not need to," she replied. "Only survive." Before he could argue, she reached for him. Her hand, cold and strong, wrapped around his wrist, and the light engulfed them both. In a single heartbeat, the world around him shifted. The broken apartment, the burning sky, the city below, it all vanished. They appeared in a vast hall, walls carved from black stone that shimmered like starlight. Long tables stretched across the room, filled with food he could not name. Fruits glowing with inner fire, meat cut from creatures he had never seen. Cups filled with liquids that shimmered between colors. The air smelled of spice and smoke, heavy and strange. At the end of the hall stood a throne of metal, sharp and cold, yet empty. Serafina led him forward, her soldiers lining the walls in silence. She pointed to a smaller chair beside hers and commanded, "Sit." He did not want to. Every bone in his body told him he was in danger, that this was another trap. But the soldiers' eyes were on him, and the weight of Seraphina's presence left no room for refusal. Slowly he sat. The goddess herself sat beside him. Servants, if they were even human, brought plates of food before them. The fruits pulsed like beating hearts and the meat still sizzled as if alive. He stared at it, his stomach turning. But Seraphina raised a piece and placed it in her mouth without hesitation. "You will eat," she said. He forced himself to pick something small, something that looked less alive than the rest. The taste exploded on his tongue, sweet and burning like fire and sugar mixed together. He coughed, his eyes watering, while Seraphina watched him with a sharp gaze. "This is the right of consorts," she explained. "In my empire it is not weapons that prove worth, but the spirit. To sit at the same table, to eat the same food, to face the same questions. If you fail to impress me tonight, then the bond is broken, and Earth will burn." Her words froze him. This was not just a meal. It was a test that decided the fate of his entire planet. She leaned closer, her golden eyes glowing brighter. "Tell me, why did you summon me?" He swallowed hard. His mind screamed to tell the truth, that it was a joke, an accident, nothing more. But another part of him, some desperate instinct, told him that if he admitted weakness, she would end everything right then. So he spoke carefully. "I wanted power. I wanted something more than this world could give. I wanted to see what waited beyond the stars." Her lips curved again, this time with the faintest trace of approval. "A mortal who dreams of stars. Perhaps you are not as small as you believe." The soldiers shifted slightly, as if reacting to her words. The hall grew heavier, the silence sharper. Seraphina asked him more questions about strength, about fear, about loyalty. Each answer he gave felt like walking on a blade, one wrong step away from death. At one point she laughed, the sound like steel striking steel. "You are weak, but you are not a coward. That is rare." But before relief could wash over him, the hall shook violently. The black walls rippled, and another voice cut through the air, deep and cruel. "You play with mortals, Seraphina. You disgrace your throne." The rival fleet had followed. Another goddess, or perhaps another warlord, had breached the hall. The food on the tables turned to ash. The soldiers drew their weapons, and the silence shattered into chaos. Seraphina stood, her armor blazing again. She looked at him once more, her face calm despite the threat. "The date is not over," she said. "It has only begun." The hall erupted in battle, and he realized the test was no longer about words or food. Now it was about survival, and if he failed, his world would die with him. The hall turned into a storm of steel and fire. Walls of black stone cracked as energy bolts struck them, shaking the very ground. Seraphina drew no weapon, yet light and power burst from her hands as if the universe itself bent to her will. Her soldiers clashed with the intruders pouring through the broken archway, their blades glowing with heat, their voices shouting in a language the human could not understand. He stood frozen at the table, his chair toppled behind him, his body shaking. He was no soldier, no warrior, only a man who had written a foolish ad for fun. Yet here he was, trapped between armies of gods. The food turned to dust on the table. The throne loomed empty, and Seraphina fought with the fury of a queen who had no intention of surrendering her place. The rival force was stronger than he had expected. At their center was a figure draped in dark armor, taller even than Seraphina, with eyes like cold stars. The air itself seemed to rot around him, and his voice was deep enough to shatter the silence. "You cannot keep your throne by hiding behind a mortal," the figure said. His gaze fell upon the human, sharp and full of disdain. "This weakling is your chosen consort? Then your reign is over." The human's knees almost buckled under that gaze. He wanted to vanish, to disappear into the cracks of the floor. But Seraphina's voice cut through the fear. "He was chosen," she said coldly, "and by law of the stars his worth will decide mine. Challenge me, and you challenge him. If he falls, so will you." The rival laughed, the sound like grinding stone. His soldiers pressed harder, blades meeting Seraphina's army in waves of fire. For a moment the human thought this was the end. Then something strange happened. The throne began to glow. The metal, sharp and cold, pulsed with light as if it had awoken. The hall shook again, but this time it was not because of weapons. It was because the throne itself had chosen to join the trial. The rival turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. "The seat calls for judgment," he growled. "Then let us see if the mortal lives long enough to touch it." The human's blood ran cold. All eyes turned to him now. Not just Serafina, not just the rival, but every soldier on both sides. The throne wanted him. It demanded him. His legs trembled, but they began to move, carrying him forward through the chaos. Energy bolts flew overhead. Blades clashed beside him, bodies fell, yet no weapon touched him. It was as if the throne itself shielded him, guiding him forward. He could feel its pull inside his chest, heavy and magnetic. Serafina fought to clear a path, her armor blazing with light. She struck down enemy after enemy, her golden eyes locked on him.
"Do not stop," she commanded.
If you sit upon it, the trial will end. But the rival was faster. In a flash of black steel, he leapt across the hall, landing between the human and the throne. His weapon was not a sword, but a spear of pure shadow. Twisting in his grip like a living thing, he lowered it toward the human's chest. "You are nothing," the rival hissed. "One strike and the stars forget you." The human froze. His body screamed for escape, but his legs would not move. He stared at the weapon pointed at him, knowing he had no chance. But then somewhere deep inside, something shifted. He thought of the ad he had written, the ridiculous words about conquest and power. He thought of the sky tearing open, of Serafina calling him the chosen one. He thought of Earth, of his city below, of every person who had no idea their fate was now tied to him. He raised his voice, though it cracked with fear. "If I am nothing, then why are you afraid of me?" The rival froze for a moment, surprised by the words. In that instant, Serafina struck. Her hand, blazing with fire, slammed against the rival's chest, throwing him back across the hall. The spear of shadow dissolved into smoke. "Move," she shouted. He ran. His heart pounded so hard it felt like his chest would burst. The throne loomed closer, its sharp edges glowing brighter, its light pulling him like a storm. He stumbled once, almost falling, but his hand touched the cold metal at last. The moment his skin met the throne, the hall erupted in light. Soldiers from both sides were thrown back. Weapons shattered, flames vanished. Serafina and her rival both froze as the throne's voice filled the chamber. Not spoken, but felt inside every soul. The mortal is chosen. His will shapes the bond. His survival is law. The rival let out a roar of rage, his armor cracking under the force of the throne's judgment. He tried to rise, but the throne's light pinned him to the ground. With a final scream, he dissolved into ash, scattered by the same light he had challenged. Silence fell. The soldiers of both sides knelt, their weapons lowered. Serafina turned toward the human, her expression unreadable, her golden eyes reflecting the light of the throne. He sat trembling, his body weak, his mind spinning. He could not believe what he had done. He had only touched the throne, yet it had ended a battle of gods. Serafina approached slowly. She stood before him, her shadow stretching across the throne. For the first time she knelt. Her voice was quiet, almost soft, though it still carried the weight of stars. "You are bound now, not by chance, not by mistake. The throne has spoken. You are my consort, my equal." His breath caught. Equal? How could he be equal to her? To someone who split the skies with her hands? Yet the soldiers bowed to him now as they bowed to her. The world had changed, and he could not return to what he once was. Serafina rose again, her face turning cold once more. "But this is only the beginning. You have taken the seat beside me. Now every god and every empire will come to test you. If you falter, they will not only take me, they will take your world." He sat in silence, his hands trembling on the arms of the throne, the weight of it pressed down on him like mountains. He had no training, no knowledge, no power, and yet the stars had chosen him. The hall grew quiet again, the soldiers waiting for command. Serafina's voice broke the silence one last time. "Tonight you survived," she said. "Tomorrow the galaxy will rise against you." The light of the throne dimmed and the hall dissolved into shadow. When his eyes opened again, he was back in his ruined apartment, the night still burning outside. But he was no longer only a man. He was something more, something the universe itself would not ignore. And for the first time he realized the joke had truly become a war. The ruined apartment smelled of smoke and dust. Broken glass still glittered on the floor, and the night sky beyond the window burned with faint trails of fire where the rival fleet had fallen. He sat in silence, his body weak, his hands shaking on his lap. The throne's glow had faded, but the memory of it pulsed in his chest like a second heartbeat. He told himself over and over that this could not be real, that no throne of gods would choose a mortal, that no war goddess would kneel before him. Yet the silence of the room pressed against him, and in that silence he could still hear the words, "The mortal is chosen." Serafina stood across from him, her silver armor cracked but still gleaming. Her golden eyes locked on him with a look that was neither anger nor pride but something in between. For the first time since she had appeared, she seemed tired. Not weak, never weak, but heavy, as if carrying the weight of countless battles that never ended. "You sat upon the throne," she said. "Now you cannot turn back." He wanted to speak, to argue, to shout that it had all been a mistake. But his throat closed again, his fear wrapping around his voice. He remembered the rival's words, the way every soldier had turned their eyes on him, the way Serafina had called him equal. Nothing in his life had prepared him for this. He was only a man who fixed machines. He was no ruler, no god, no warrior, but the universe had chosen him anyway. Serafina stepped closer. Her presence filled the small room, the walls bending as if they wanted to move away from her. She looked down at him and her voice dropped low. "Do you understand what this means? You are bound to me. You sit at my side. The empires of the stars will hear of this and they will come, some to test you, some to destroy you, some to claim you for themselves, and you will face them all." His mouth went dry. "Why me?" he whispered. "I am nobody," she shook her head. "There are no nobodies in the eyes of the throne. It sees what you cannot. Something in you is greater than fear. That is why it called you." Her words rang in his ears, but they gave him no comfort. He lowered his gaze, staring at the broken pieces of his old life around him. The chair, the desk, the shattered window. Just hours ago he had been nothing but a bored mechanic looking for a laugh. Now, Earth itself could be the battlefield for gods. The silence broke with a sound from the sky, a rumble low and steady, not of thunder but of engines. He looked up, his heart freezing again. Another ship had entered the atmosphere, smaller than Serafina's but sleek, sharp, and fast. Its lights scanned the city like searching eyes. Serafina's expression hardened. She turned to the window, her body tense. "They have already heard," she said. "The first hunters come." The ship descended lower, stopping above the street. A voice boomed from it, strange yet clear in his mind. "The mortal has touched the throne. By law of the Pantheon, his choice is demanded. Mortal, declare your allegiance, to Serafina or to the Empire of Blades." His stomach twisted. The voice was not asking, it was commanding. The entire city seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his words. Serafina looked back at him. "Do not listen. Their promises are lies. Stay at my side and you will live." But the voice returned, louder now. "Choose the Empire and Earth will be spared. Choose Serafina, and your people will suffer the war she carries with her." The weight of the decision crushed him. His world, his entire planet, balanced on the edge of his choice. If he chose Serafina, the battles would come. He had seen it already, the rival fleet, the war that followed her. But if he abandoned her, if he chose the Empire, what would they do to her? And what would they truly do to Earth once he surrendered? Serafina stepped closer, kneeling until her eyes met his. "You think you are weak," she said quietly. "But you have already faced gods and lived. Do not let fear choose for you." Her words lit something inside him. He remembered the rival's spear, the way he had spoken back even when terrified. He remembered the throne's light, the soldiers kneeling. For one brief moment he had not been weak. He had not been nobody. He had been chosen. He stood slowly, his legs trembling, but he forced them to hold. He turned toward the window, his voice raw but steady. "I choose." The silence deepened. The ship hovered above, waiting. The soldiers outside turned their eyes upward. Even Serafina's gaze fixed on him, sharp and unblinking. He breathed deeply, his chest heavy, and shouted, "I choose Serafina!" The words rang through the air like thunder. The ship above paused, its lights flickering. Then, without warning, it fired a beam of energy toward the street, a weapon meant to punish his decision. But Serafina was already there. She raised her hand, her armor blazing, and the beam shattered like glass against her power. The ship trembled under its own attack, then spun upward, retreating into the night sky. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was heavy, filled with the promise of more battles, more tests, more enemies to come. But for the first time, the human did not feel like he was only surviving. He had made a choice, and it had changed everything.